Right now, it looks like the worst coronavirus outbreak in the world, based on the numbers that states and other places have reported, countries as well, which themselves are not picture perfect at all. But based on the data we have, the worst outbreak appears to be New York City. Listen to the statistic. At least 1 out of every 500 New Yorkers has died from this virus. And while there are a lot of reasons for that, from the failure of federal leadership to implement testing to particular features of New York City, a new New Yorker article argues that part of the reason for the severity of the outbreak was a failure of local policy. A Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who wrote that New Yorker piece, Charles Duhigg, joins me now. Charles, I was really gripped and persuaded by the reporting that you present in the article. What's the basic case here?
The basic case is that at the beginning of a pandemic, we have this very unique opportunity, a window, when if the leaders say the right things, and particularly if they put the scientists front and center, we can convince people to stay home. And in Seattle, they did that very, very ably. In New York, it was much more muddied and complicated. And as a result, during this communication crisis, which is what a pandemic really is, as much as a medical and health crisis, New York failed. And as a result, we saw cases explode.
I think I'm going to play some of the things the mayor said, and again, stipulated as we have throughout all the coverage, even the first block about the president. This is hard. All this stuff is hard. But it was fairly clear the mayor's view of this early on, even in the first 2 weeks of March, was not like, ring the alarm, this is the time to shut it all down at all. Take a listen to some of the things he had to say during that period.
Where do we stand right now from New York and then from what you know about what's happening in cities around the world?
You know, Franklin Roosevelt, the famous quote, "We have nothing but fear itself." For the vast majority of New Yorkers, life is going on pretty normally right now, and we want to encourage that. If you love your neighborhood bar, go there now. Some places are closing schools en masse. We think that's a mistake.
St. Patrick's Day parades in Dublin, in Boston, in Denver have been canceled. What is the status of New York City?
It's not a slam dunk to say this is something that should be instantly canceled.
It is a slam dunk by March 11th to cancel the St. Paddy's Day parade. And that to me was such an indicator that the mayor did not have his eyes on the scale of this. What does your reporting say about that?
Well, Dr. Tom Frieden, who used to be the commissioner of public health here in New York and was also the head of the CDC, he estimates that if de Blasio and Cuomo had shut down New York 10 days earlier, we would have seen 50 to 80% fewer deaths in the state. And what's going on here is sort of two things. The first is, if you'll remember, de Blasio has gotten a lot of applause in the past, particularly with the Ebola outbreak, for being very aggressive about saying, don't panic, don't overreact. We need to keep New York going, even if we have a couple of situations of illness. Obviously, it's very different here. But the second thing, according to my reporting, is that de Blasio has a long history of tension with his agencies, particularly with the Department of Health. And so as experts, his fantastic public health officers were coming to him and saying, shut things down. He was resisting. His staff was fighting with them. In fact, 2 of them had to threaten to resign in order to get the city hall to shut down the schools and restaurants.
Yeah, you report this, that there's 2 people, the city's assistant commissioner of communicable diseases, Dr. Marcel Layton, and the deputy health commissioner, Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, who indicated to staff that they were going to publicly resign unless the mayor finally took action. I think it was the schools, right, and other things on that sort of fateful Monday when New York was one of the later places to do it.
That's exactly right. And I should make clear, neither of those physicians spoke to me, right? They're both very, they're great public health officers. And in fact, Marcy Layton in particular, Dr. Layton, is revered around the nation. She's actually a graduate of something called the Epidemic Intelligence Service, which is a part of the CDC. And there's about 3,000 EIS alums across the nation who are kind of the front lines, the shock troops for responding to this and other pandemics and epidemics. And one of the things that the EIS training really stresses is when you are communicating, it is critical at the beginning of a pandemic that you say what you know and don't know, that you maintain trust, and that most importantly, you say the same thing over and over, that you don't muddy the message by saying one thing and doing another. And de Blasio and Cuomo have both been criticized for that. If you'll remember, de Blasio, on the day that the gyms were closing down in New York City, he asked his driver to take him from Gracie Mansion, where he lives, to the Park Slope Y so he could get in one last workout. And even his consultants and advisors said that was a terrible, terrible, perhaps unethical idea.
What finally is a lesson here about what Seattle did in terms of the messaging they gave, the consistency of it, and also sort of not moving too quickly, but moving in a very specific way towards what ended up being a sort of full shutdown?
What Seattle did is exactly what the CDC and the Epidemic Intelligence Service says you're supposed to do, which is that they put the scientists front and center. There's this real risk that if a politician is the head of communications, when you're talking about a pandemic, that you'll politicize the communications. But some people, half the people perhaps, won't do what they're being told simply because they don't trust the politician. So what Seattle did is they put the scientists front and center, and they moved very aggressively to shut things down. In fact, Dr. Jeff Duchin, who is the head of public health for Seattle-King County, he went to one of the top politicians and he said, look, we need to shut things down immediately. And I know we can't do that today, but we need to start saying things today so that the population will be ready for a shutdown in 2 or 3 days from now. And one of the things that Dow Constantine, that politician, did is he called Microsoft, which is, of course, based in an area near Seattle, and said, look, we don't have any cases yet. We only have a handful of fatalities across the country, but will you tell all your workers to work from home? Amazon did the same thing. Because they knew that by emptying the streets of all these commuters, 100,000 employees, everyone would get the message. This is really serious. Something's going on. When the government says stay home, we should stay home.
All right, Charles Duhigg, thank you so much for sharing that great reporting.